Yes, this week in car audio. Tune in, tune in, tune in, tune in, tune in. This week in car audio. Tune in, tune in, tune in, tune in. We'll be talking about bass, talking about chips, talking about rings. You ain't got them, zip your lip. You got a problem you haven't found, check your grounds. The show about to start. Tune in, 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 tune in. This week in car audio. Yeah. Tune in. This week in car audio.
Welcome to This Week in Car Audio with your host, the Judge, Doug Stockton, with your co-host, Jeffrey Fernandez. What's up, Jeff? Dude.
Oh man,
it's all going
messing
bad.
up again.
It's all going bad.
Reminds me of that character back in the '80s, Max Headroom.
Max Headroom?
That's yeah. It's like I'm like sketching in and out here.
Oh, dude, this is so bad. I'm having so many problems right here. I'm trying to get stuff going live. It ain't working. You're glitching out. There we go. I am live. I got the stuff. Here we go. There it is.
Out here.
There we go. Now we're live. I got everything working. Let's see. Oh, but he's not DB Don. Live. I got the stuff. Here we go. There it is.
Out here.
Okay. There we go. Now I need to get over here and close this out. There we go. So far, we got looking over here. We got SQ Sounds out of Bridgetown, Barbados. We got Moises Alejandre. That's, what's his name? Son. Manny Lob's son. Mario Anthony Perella. Hey, guys, checking in. We got all kinds of people starting to check in here. We're going to start talking. Oh, let me go live. Hey, Jeffrey, anything new come up with you this week, sir?
This week? No. We're just thawing out. All last week out here in Texas, man, we just hit like some kind of crazy ice storm. And fortunately now we're thawing out and we're getting back into the swing of things, and roads are travelable and now.
Oh, that's right. So. You're in Texas now. You're not in California anymore. People don't know how to drive in that stuff.
Exactly. Well, especially Texas, I heard. So I've been watching YouTube, and there's this stretch of freeway out here in Dallas where there's this camera, and then I guess it was just showing cars spinning out. I guess a bunch of like two-wheel drive cars that, were caught with their tires spinning out. Right. And oh man, it was just really scary. But fortunately, weather's being good. I think it's going to rain again tomorrow, but not as crazy. But at least we're not getting the ice storm. So
yep.
Thankfully.
So are you familiar with Club 33?
Is that the SPL team?
No, Club 33 at Disneyland.
No. What is that?
So that's a special only people with all kinds of things. So my wife's heading there. It's $60,000 a year to get in. That's the membership, and then it's $15,000 a month.
Is that like VIP or?
Yes, it's super VIP. And then
Calvin here says it's a secret restaurant.
It is a secret restaurant. He is absolutely right. Jeffrey thawing out. All right, so let me change this name real quick. Properties. I got to change that to Steve Deckert. So DB Don and I were talking last week about our influences in car audio. And, man, this name came up. That's all I'm going to say. So, oops. Control Z. I am all over the place today, Jeff.
Oh, man. You and I both.
All right. So first, I want to say thanks to our sponsors today. I know where the food hides. Even if it's a secret, I'll sniff it out. That says Calvin.
I believe it.
Where is my thing disappeared on me? There we go. Anyway, so DB Don and I were talking how we used to do ported horns and, what we designed and whatnot. And the name came up. Steve Deckert of Deckware Designs. Uh, for you guys that don't know, he designed a subwoofer box called the Death Box for a single 10 or dual 10s if you want to do clamshell. And then he also designed another one called a Wicked One, which the half Wicked One is what people typically used in their vehicles. And that's kind of most people's introductions into like advanced subwoofer box design. And he did some house wreckers, and he actually wrote a book and all this other stuff. And he's way too smart for us, but luckily we got him. Welcome, Mr. Steve Deckert.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm sure I missed a bunch of stuff. Why don't you tell us your version of you?
My version of me?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's a unique perspective.
Well, just so you know, so I'm Doug Mother effin' Stockton. That's my version of me. My wife disagrees with that, but but that's my version of me. So, what's your version of you? Coming from somebody with a mind like yours.
Boy, self-taught, enthusiastic, blessed, fortunate.
Okay.
To be in the right place at the right time with the right ideas.
Okay. So like I've said, you were absolutely one of my influences when I started designing subwoofer boxes. And actually, your manufacturing your own subwoofers actually is what started my company manufacturing my subwoofers. I went a different direction. You were going for efficient. I was going for loud as hell with as much power as you can throw to it. It's a slightly different direction than what you were going. But you were my influence in that you were one of the strong reasons that I started Sonic FX as a subwoofer and amplifier manufacturing company. That was back in 2000. So I appreciate what you did. Like I said, I went around and used a ported horn showing people all over the country my ported horn design, and it was and variation would be loosely putting it of your Wicked One. I used the principles from the Wicked One to put it together and then expanded on it in my own direction. Says real quick here, Tiffany says, Steve, I've been hearing about you for years in our house. Nice to finally meet the legend.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
Oh, Base Mata says, now I can harass Jeffrey on Facebook and YouTube. So anyway, so you feel that you're just fortunate to have been in the right place at the right time. Well, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I wasn't always into audio. Most of us weren't. There's a point in your life where you get the bug. And I had, back in the 1980s, I had a pretty high stress job, corporate job, taking care of maintenance and engineering for a chain of restaurants in the New Jersey area. And I was pretty good at it, but it was, like I said, high stress and complicated. And after a period of time, I decided, I'd like a simpler life. So I quit and I came back here to Peoria where we are now. And I took a job as a carpenter so that I wouldn't have to think.
Yep.
And I rather enjoyed that. I did it for several years, met some good people on that job. One gentleman named Paul, who was a good friend of mine, or became a good friend of mine. He was married at the time. I was single. And he brought a book to work from Jensen Imperial, 1957. And it was a speaker book full of speaker plans. Back then, when you bought a speaker or a stereo, you didn't buy the whole, turnkey package. You bought the drivers and you built your own box.
Right.
And so the biggest box in the book was the Jensen Imperial, and it was a rear-loaded folded horn. It was 28 cubic feet, with bend waves to 600 hertz. He wanted to build this thing, but his wife would kill him if she caught him doing that. So he talked me into doing it, and so I did it. And as I was putting this thing together, you know, the curiosity was building because I'm dying to hear. I know it's going to make a lot of bass because it's so huge.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I had it assembled, I was talking into the, you know, the cutout for the woofer and listening to my voice get amplified, and that was getting me pretty excited. So when I finally got it done, it was a 15-inch, a single 15-inch design, and I didn't have a 15, so I went in the bedroom and I grabbed a pair of old Pioneer 10-inch three-ways, some acoustic suspension speakers from probably the late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
Power hungry. Uh, but that's all there was. So I scavenged a 10-inch driver out of that cabinet and I made an adapter, and I shoved it in the opening of the Imperial and hooked it up to the Pioneer receiver, probably 25-watt receiver. And I brought the other speaker upstairs and I set it on the bench and had it playing the other, excuse me, the other channel. And when I flipped the balance over from the Pioneer stock to the driver in the Imperial cabinet, there really isn't words to describe what I heard. The difference in gain had to be 12 dB, maybe more.
Wow.
And the bass had to be an octave lower. I lived on a property at the time where the neighbor was about maybe 112 feet from my garage, and he came running out of his house because he had stuff shaking in his bedroom, and that was just from playing the radio.
Right.
So it just was a bass amplifier, and I had no idea something like that was possible. No, no clue whatsoever. To me, that was magic, and I had to have more of that. So that kind of set the hook, and we had a lot of fun with that. There were periods of time where that cabinet ended up in places where it never should have been. But I had one in my garage. The first one that I built just stayed out there. We built many of them, but the first one stayed out there, and I had a tube oscillator that I could sweep from 20 to 20 kilohertz without steps, just a nice smooth sweep. And I used that to wazoo the Imperial is what we called it. And we would just start at maybe 100 hertz and very slowly drop the dial until we get down to 20 and, experience the earthquake that would take place. And I had that thing in my garage, and about, it was like drugs. You got addicted to it. Every day about 2:30, I had to have a little fix of that. So I'd sneak out there for lunch, and I'd wazoo it with that frequency generator, and it would sound like a helicopter was landing on the roof, or it would feel like that.
Right.
You know,
So we call that bass therapy around here.
Well, see, now this was back long before car audio went off the deep end. I mean that in a respectful way.
You mean like the 20 and 30,000 watt amps?
Yes, nobody had heard bass like what's happening today, not even close.
Right.
This Imperial was that kind of similar bass to that, but it was coming out of a single 15-inch driver.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point in time when every time I would wazoo this thing, I'd catch out of the corner of my eye this old man about 3 houses down in his pajamas running across this empty lot. And after the third time, I figured that guy's looking for somebody. And then after a while longer, I figured out he's looking for me because he's probably working first or third shift,
Right.
sleep, and every day this son of a gun and so we had a lot of fun with that. There was also a point in time where we took an Eli Whitney catalog and ordered the cheapest crap in it just to see what we could do with it because it was entertainment. So we had this $15 12-inch woofer. It might have been 20, and it came in cast frame. We built a 1 cubic foot sealed box and stuck it in there and swept it. It went down to 100 hertz, not a, you heard silence below 100 hertz.
Okay.
But this box would just fit through the 14.5-inch opening or the 14-inch opening for that 15-inch woofer. So we stuck it in the face of the Imperial instead of the woofer, pointing into the throat of the horn, sealed up the front. And what that did is it turned that horn into a bandpass horn with a Q of probably 2 or 3, which means just a horrendous.
Not 7.
Well, I don't know how high you guys have gotten it to go. I don't even know how high that was.
Well, Q7 is going to be nice and smooth, right? So that's what your ideal is. But if you're at a 2, that thing looks like a mountain peak.
Well, and it peaked at 22 hertz.
That's awesome.
So that's why it was so fun to wazoo it with that frequency generator in slow motion. See? So this was in there. This was just one of our experiments. We had done dozens of combinations, from fitting as many 15s inside the thing as we could to, a single 8 and everything in between. And we were doing pro audio at the time, and one of our customer clients owned a small bar, and he was having a lot of trouble with bass in his bar. If you think cars have problems with bass, bars are notorious because nobody sets them up right.
Right.
And this was just I don't know, 5,000 square foot bar, small dance floor, that kind of a thing. And they had 418s in there that were making absolutely no bass. And we told them we can get the bass fixed. We told them they've never even heard bass yet. And so one thing led to another, and he wanted us to bring this cabinet down. So we put the Imperial in the back of the truck, drove down there, carted it out, two-wheeled it through the front door, put it on the dance floor, and we brought our own amp. It wasn't probably 120 watts. Hooked it up to this thing, and we still had that 12 in there. And we brought the frequency generator, and now this is probably 5:30. So they're starting to have some dinner action, and there's people starting to fill in the place. And, we're just ignoring all that. And we started at 100 hertz, turned it up to clipping, backed it off just a bit, and then just slowly dropped it. The slower you do it, the better the effect.
Right.
And by the time we got to 50, that was starting to grab the room pretty hard and getting people's attention. And we started seeing people squirm at their tables and looking around, kind of wondering, they're getting a little concerned. They don't know what's going on. Nobody announced, that there's a test happening. And we just kept on going until we got, I don't know, down to 20 or so, and then just flipped the switch. We had ashtrays on the tables moving around like air hockey pucks. And then we just killed the power and put this thing on the two-wheeler and started to walk out with it. And the bartender got a little panicky and said, "Aren't you going to play music?" I said,
we don't do that.
Point of that. You wanted to hear bass. You're never going to ever hear more bass than that. What would be the point of music. No, we're not going to hook up music to it. And eventually we got them as a client and put some of those in their bar. We put those in most of the nightclubs in the area.
Hmm.
Yeah. Do you guys remember Audio Control made a product called the Epicenter?
Yeah, so they still make that.
Did they?
Yeah, so that's actually a pretty popular thing because you can fine tune the frequency that you want to peak song at to help it align with the system that you got designed in your vehicle. So it is it's used, just not a lot by most of the people we do, because um, when we get a true wave from a direct signal, we can create more acoustical energy, hence a higher SPL, than with a epicenter. Because every time you add a component, it muddles the music. It removes something to create what it wants to create. So, in general, the epicenters are a deterrent to what we're trying to accomplish in the car audio competition world.
I'm not sure if it hasn't changed since we used to use it, because when it originally came out, it was simply an algorithm that played the bass line an octave lower than it was.
Yes, it must have changed because, like I said, the ones they have now, you can literally dial. Um, you can dial, say, I want this song to play 30 hertz. So you dial it up to that, and all the peak notes are going to be 30 hertz. So
Gotcha.
it doesn't change whatever octave,
Yeah.
but that's it.
Well,
Um,
it was real simple in the early days, but we surely had a lot of fun with it, especially on those large Imperials. We
so,
had to actually put those under lock and key so the DJs couldn't access it.
oh,
We we only used that when we went to the bars to test, to
yeah.
inspect stuff. And
So when I read your book, I don't remember if it was your website or your book. You talked about the development of the Death Box,
yeah,
which at the time was a single 10. I believe it was an extended cab truck, and you were trying to help them compete in a sound off organization. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
sure, sure. Um, so after after this whole Imperial saga and the pro audio thing, and being a carpenter fizzled out, I got disabled and I needed a job, so I took a job at a car audio, or well, a stereo shop that did car audio, and that was where I heard my first sound stage, where I got into car audio and started building boxes. And I'm sure that many DIY guys and beginners in car audio have experienced building a box in their garage. They may have tuned it to the Theo and small parameters, and they test it out, and it's making all kinds of bass, and they're real excited. And then they put it in the car, and there's no frickin' bass.
Yeah.
When we were making boxes for customers, this would happen, one out of every three times, and it got expensive. And I thought, well, we need a box that's immune to that. And so the woofer is going to have to be taken out of the picture so that it's inside the box, protected, so it doesn't know if it's in a car or in your basement. And that's kind of where that came from. And then we made it tunable so that we wouldn't get locked into a particular driver, although we used the Kicker competition C10s at that time. That
Hmm.
was a fairly new company, and they were making some great product. And that woofer had a good sensitivity, and it had the right FS and the right Q to go pretty low in a small box. So it worked really well. And that was our generic box that would work in anybody's car.
Yeah. So let me describe it for people that have not seen a death box. So essentially, it's 21 inches tall, roughly 12 by 12 wide. So it's like a 10-inch woofer just fits inside the box. I think it's 21 and a half or 21 inches tall, roughly. This is all from memory. I haven't built one in about 20 years, so forgive me if I'm not exactly right on it. So I remember the woofer was barely fit in it, and then there was literally a square box that was only 6 inches tall that fit inside of that. You mounted the subwoofer to that, and now that 6-inch little box had a, for lack of a better term, had your initial port, and then that went out of a half moon port at the bottom. Now you would adjust that 6-inch box up and down to maximize the peak of the vehicle for competing. Is that a good, accurate description, Steve?
It was for competing and just personal taste. Some people like a boomier sound, and some people like a flatter sound. Um, it was a pretty decent sound quality box and SPL box, really. It was designed as a sound quality box, but at least initially, the as a car audio installer, when you're selling car audio, one of the problems that you run into in a hurry is power handling. And you set the gains on the amps right, and you get everything dialed in, and it sounds great. And then as soon as the customer leaves and they go around the corner into the parking lot, you know where I'm going with this. So
Jeffrey, you've never seen any customer. No, that's the way it came from the factory. The settings, huh?
Exactly.
It vibrated itself like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I turned it up just 3/4 volume or whatever they said.
So, you get tired of cooking woofers, and I thought, man, we gotta really get something that can handle some power. So we started looking at, well, what's cooking them? It's over excursion from improper tuning, sloppy feel, small parameters that are never right, and box designs that are non-symmetrical, and load the cone more on one side than the other, and make the voice coil rub on the pole, and all of these.
Jeffrey can tell you about that in a super street vehicle. So super street vehicles for us is we put a wall, and then you try and fit as many subwoofers on it. Why don't you tell them real quick, Jeffrey, the issues you were having in your super street vehicle with loading the subwoofers and stuff?
Well, it was back when somebody had this really interesting idea of putting this loading wall,
whammy
or
bar.
What we used to call a whammy. It was essentially an angle that deflected the wave. Oh, I don't know if it was sooner than the other woofer that was right next to it. And in theory, I mean, you would think that that woofer in that corner that it's in front of the whammy board would always get cooked, and we knew that would happen, but we did it anyway because for some reason the SPL output of it was what we wanted. So we would do put things behind it, thick walls. We put the angle in there. We'd fill it with like concrete or just a little bit of crazy stuff. We didn't worry about I guess maybe the timing or quarter wave, or we just built it big, and as I guess whatever we thought that would help.
So the advantage of building it big is because you can always shrink it down, and put adjustments in there. That's why back in the 2000s and the 90s, people build these huge systems in their car, and then we would continually shrink them down until we maximize the vehicle, right? But in this first super street car I built, which was what's his name in Salinas, Miguel Ayala's, he had that rabbit. He had the orange rabbit, and the lower driver or passenger side subwoofer, because it was lower, it was offset like this, right? So the passenger side was lower,
right,
and the driver side was higher. But we would blow that lower sub almost every burp, and what we figured out was because it was so close to the wall and we were trying to get it so close, it would load differently on one side of the driver than the other. So we would tilt the cone, and we would short it out. So what we ended up doing is we added nickels to one side of the cone so that even though we had higher pressure on one side, it was more mass to move, and it kind of saved us. So we would get like 5 or 6 burps out of it before we would blow it up instead of one.
Right, right.
Mm.
So,
Well, with a death box, you have a sealed cavity
yep.
that's symmetrical,
Mm-hmm.
and that really helps. And then on the other side, um, that entire design with that duct hitting right down the center of the dust cap is also symmetrical.
Mm-hmm.
And that came to pass from, oh God, I don't know how many boxes we built, but we had a reconing business, so it wasn't a problem blowing up woofers. And we did it on purpose for a long time just to see, because we'd start out barely getting the power handling rating of the driver, with a typical fourth order bandpass with a 4-inch round port off to the side somewhere. That's where it began. And by the time we finished, we probably had at least over double the power handling of any driver that we tested in that box
Mm-hmm.
versus a non-symmetrical box. So it made a big difference. We would hot glue or super glue a piezo tweeter element onto the pole piece and then put that into a microphone preamp and measure the voice coil rub. And when you didn't get any rub at all, then the air around the voice coil, that gap of air is exactly the same. So the temperature of the coil is exactly the same. There's no hot spots on the coil. And, it's moving air the way it was designed to. And, as long as you can keep everything in its happy zone, it can stomach boatloads of power. And we used to get a lot of boxes that weren't tuned right and take the woofers out of them, and they look like, the surrounds are just toast.
Yeah.
They're just floppy. The spiders, the whole suspension is shot. If you turn the cone upside down, it just falls down, right? And man, that stuff sounds bad. And I've seen this happen, with 100-watt amplifier on a 250-watt. Now, don't laugh at these numbers. These are 19.
Yeah.
It's okay. But the point is, with half the power, half the power the thing was rated for, they could beat it to death.
So I will say with that death box though, I blew a ton of woofers in it and you couldn't even tell. So it also, because it didn't add uneven pressure, even though the triple joint was blown, the driver would still run and it wouldn't rub. So you would never hear the knocking noise and your subwoofer would have been blown for months. So because us DB draggers may have overpowered the driver a little bit. Steve was, I believe his drivers were like 200-watt drivers back then.
Yeah, they weren't that high.
Yeah, and I was running a 500 to each coil, so I may have been overdriving that sub just slightly when I did that.
Well, the Wicked one took that to a whole nother level.
He did. So let's grab a couple of these questions real quick. So he says, how did you come up with the name Death Box?
Because of all the woofers that we blew up in it.
That's awesome answer.
Yeah.
Okay, here speaking of the Wicked one, we got our question on this. So Steve, did you notice the left adding issues with Wicked one box having an equal rear chamber angles and front chamber angles with the X shape that it has? So my understanding of what he's saying is, let's see here. Did he? He redid the question. Says, Steve, did you notice any loading issues with the Wicked one box? It has an unequal rear chamber with angles, and same with the front chamber with the X-shaped design. So,
Well,
go ahead. I bet you can answer that.
The Wicked one is, that's a folded horn where you have two halves, so it's two folded horns that share the last horn flare. In other words, the mouth of the horn is shared by both halves. So everything has to be perfectly symmetrical. The drivers need to match. Um, the amplification needs to match. And if it does, if it all matches well, then the wavefronts combine in the throat of that horn, and you get away with half the space, because otherwise that box would be twice that size to do what it does.
Yep. So that's what we were talking about last week was the quarter wave theory, right? So to propagate the wave properly, for what that box was tuned at, it would have to be it'd have to be huge. So I actually built the 32-inch Wicked one, right? Oh, no, 24. So the 24. Because obviously it was going in a car. 32 is very difficult to get into a vehicle, but the 24 wasn't. And I used that and learned about that final horn and how the amount of times the surface area on that horn changed every inch. So it was distance over size was the number, would actually do the tuning for that. So I would play with my tunings, like with that, changing that flare to maximize the SPL of my vehicle. So I learned that, but like I said, but that came from first starting with your box, right? So that's absolutely where it started. And it was phenomenal to learn that stuff and to see when that light goes off of, oh, I see what I'm doing, and you learn that. I mean, obviously you had that same thing when you did that initial box that you built way back when, and we're running a little speaker on it.
I did. In fact, the Wicked one has its own story.
All right, let's hear that.
Um, Friend of mine was a good musician, and I used to go hang out on jam night, and I would sit at the bottom of the steps right in front of the drum kit. And after, a couple hours, my chest hurt from the kick drum, but in a good way, if that makes any sense. And
To
I would
us, yes.
I would walk home because it was just a few houses on the other side of the alley, and I'd walk home after jam thinking, "There's no way a stereo can do that. It's impossible."
Mm-hmm.
But before I got halfway home, then it shifted to, what's it going to take to make a stereo do that?
Mm-hmm.
And I started getting visions of like a W shape with just a whole bunch of 10-inch drivers clamshelled in it, just a linear wall of semi horn loaded drivers. But when I went out to do it, then the ideas started flooding in. It actually started out that way. And I decided I want to make it expand both horizontally and vertically at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that means I'm going to need smaller drivers, a longer horn. Everything's going to have to change, but it's not too late to change it. So I set it up for 4 5.25-inch drivers. So they'd be clamshelled like this, and right in the very back of the V of a horn. Okay. So, and one set on top of the other. And the idea was that I'd get about the same cone area as a 12-inch driver that way, but 4 times faster, because the moving mass is so much lower on a 5.25. So right. This is how I built it. I put it all together. I put it in the room I had at the house I lived in at the time was perfectly square. And in fact, it was worse than that. It was 15 by 15 feet with a 7.5-foot ceiling. Mm-hmm. So if you do your math, that's not a good thing for bass.
Square's never good for bass.
it's this just, oh, it was such a terrible experience. So I just built one because it was a real bitch to build. It was not fun. It had compound radius angles in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it all done. It looked great. I dreaded the thought of even doing another one, right? So I drug it in the house. I put it in the corner, fired it up, played uh, some good heavy metal, and it was the best bass I ever heard, sound quality wise. It just had this
Accurate, right?
incredible, incredible hit, just incredible. And I was in love with it, literally. And I just had a little bookshelf speaker on the other channel just to even it out so I could listen to it. Well, I listened to it that way for 6 months before I got myself talked into building the mate for it. And so, to make a long story short, I built the mate for it. I brought it back in the house and put it in the other corner. It doesn't have any drivers in it yet. I'm going to do that while it's in the house. So I have the front off the thing and it's in the corner. There's no drivers in it. I have the other one turned on because you got to listen to music while you're working on music.
Obviously.
And I notice while I'm working, there's no bass. I mean, none. And I'm thinking, that's so weird. Something must be wrong, but I'm too busy to, I'm going to do this first, then I'll worry about that. So I put the drivers in it and I button it up, and there is still no bass. In fact, it's like there's even less bass than there was before there was no bass. And I'm thinking, what in the hell's going on here? So I thought, all right, well, there's going to be some bass in about a minute because I'm hooking it up. And I hooked it up and I turned it on, and I couldn't wait because the bass from just that one was so killer good that two was just going to be an orgasm, right?
Yep.
I turn it on and it sounded like somebody high passed it at 80 hertz. There was silence below 80 hertz.
Mm.
And, you know, so I'm checking, make sure everything's in phase and doing all the stuff you do. And to make, you know, there was no bass. Now, if I went outside on the driveway, there was a lot of bass. But in that room, there was nothing. There wasn't a spot in there you could stand, even in the corners or against the walls where there was any bass. And there was no internet back then. So, you know, I had to get out some graphing paper and draw the waves by hand at different frequencies to figure out that I had created a standing wave exactly the size of the room, right down the center line.
So that's what
So,
we were talking about in the cars yesterday while we were
yes,
tuning the panels.
that's what happens in cars.
Yes.
I did the exact same thing to myself. This was before I even got into car audio.
Mm-hmm.
But so now I'm really pissed off because I figured out why it's doing it. It works so good. It's such a perfect design that it won't work. Right? Because it created it had a hemispherical wavefront that expanded at 4,000%, I mean 400% per foot in front of the cabinet. So it was a wall to, you know, it's just floor to ceiling, wall to wall, perfect hemisphere.
Yeah.
And it just, there was no, so after being in a bad mood for about a month, not able to listen to my stereo that I worked so hard on, I decided I'm going to have to get serious now. Something has to be done. So I took the front off. I took the 5 1/4s out of the box and I put the front back on. I cut a hole in the front and put a single 6-inch woofer in there, because I knew that would create a comb filter effect and there'd be some bass somewhere in that room. I didn't care if I had to go sit in the corner or against the wall. I really didn't care at this point. I just wanted to have some damn bass,
Yeah,
right?
some old school corner loading.
Exactly. So I did this, and it it worked. So the reason there was no bass when I brought the empty cabinet in there is it became a bass trap.
Hmm.
And the reason there was no bass when I turned it on is because it canceled it, the standing wave.
Right.
So then when I had the two 6.5s in there, it had glorious bass. It's been that way ever since. It's been 30 years now. In fact, I'll show them to you.
So is that why you started building those panels to change the rooms for because you have for home
No,
theater? Oh, okay.
that was way before that.
Oh, okay.
This was just this was what taught me that you can horn load a port. Because when I took those 5 1/4s out of the throat,
Mm-hmm.
those openings turned into a port.
Got you.
See, I had a huge box with a port right at the throat of that horn. And so the bass that came out of that thing was insane. In fact, the problem with it is always too much bass. You can't
No
even
such
put a,
thing.
you have to put something with an FS of about 50 to 80 hertz in there. Otherwise, the 40 hertz will blow you out of the room. So when I did the Wicked one, I already knew that this would work. And the Wicked one is just a two-dimensional version of it. It's just the one you built, the WO32.
Yeah.
It's like it's like half of it's just a slice of this thing.
Hmm.
The original Wicked one was a little bit more bodacious than that, but the fact that you can horn load a port is a game changer. And I can see, well, with SPL, that box somebody got right after we did it, and this would have been in the early, about the mid to late 90s. Somebody hit 151.8 with a pair of tens in a pickup truck with that box.
Yeah. I
Back,
remember that. Yeah.
back then, that was a lot.
Yeah.
I know it's not that much of a deal now, but
So I got two questions on here real quick. Says Steve, who is your favorite artist to test your enclosures with?
oh God, I would I would say Boris Blank.
And what is that? I am not familiar with the Boris Blank.
Boris
Me
Blank
neither.
is the guy that invented the group Yellow. He does electronic music.
So like EDM type stuff, or
Yeah, it's not it's got some of the best dynamic range and some of the best bass of any of the stuff that you're going to
so
stream.
so you're looking for full range music, and
Yeah, I want, you know, I don't want to listen to a whole library of CDs if I can get one artist that can get it all crammed into a single track. And that's this guy. He can.
okay,
Uh, you'll have to look him up, Boris Blank.
okay, Boris Blank.
Stuff like that. It's also really good for imaging. Um, so if you're trying to dial that in or explore what's possible in a particular setup, it's good for that.
So Aaron Bryant says, "What does this have to do with car audio?" So Aaron, let me explain to you what it has to. You must have missed the beginning of this. So everybody in car audio starts somewhere. For me personally, DB Don and a handful of other people that I know that are very good box builders and people that you probably learned how to build boxes from. They most likely started with a Wicked One or a Death Box and kind of learned the dynamics, just like Steve's talking about right now, where he took a subwoofer and moved its location and went, oh, wait, you can port a horn? And that's where a lot of people came up with their designs for their six order walls that they're running now. So everybody's running six order walls, and it started from something. This is tonight is what we're talking about. It's the history of how it started. For most of the guys in the car audio game, people that you learned from most likely had learned from Steve. Same with me. I learned so much stuff from Steve. I was building a sixth order wall back in I think 2003 or 2004. And initially, I was just going to build essentially a big wicked one in the car. And when I did the math, to make the horn work in a wall format was just so, it was an insurmountable task because the waveform would have to be of such a length that there was no way I was going to be able to create that inside the vehicle. So what I did is I started playing around with 6-order designs. I was doing with less than 2,000 watts. It was like 1825, I think I measured on my thing, and two 12-inch $100 speakers. In 2005, I was doing a 158. So that was a lot of based on Steve Deckert describing how efficiency was key. And you gotta understand, back then, the biggest amp that they made, at least that I produced and that I could get out there and even play with, was 1,500 watts or 2,000 watts. So efficiency was God back then. And so we were trying to create designs, and Steve was doing it on a different scale, and he was thinking of it differently than the rest of the world at that time. And I'm sure Steve was looking at stuff, like he said, he started with stuff that was from the, what you say, 30s and 40s. I actually went back and looked at books from the 30s and 40s. And if anybody watching this program right now, if you ever have a chance, go look at the stuff people were designing back in the 30s and 40s. Their minds and the math that they did and their understanding of acoustical energy was so phenomenal then. But the equipment couldn't keep up with what their brains were producing. And now we can produce so much acoustical energy, and if we use the stuff that they had back in the 30s and 40s with their efficiency that they were doing, you guys are going to find, you know, I mean, that I promise you a lot of those principles are in those Super Street 170 plus vehicles nowadays.
I can give you a good example of that.
Okay, please do.
When I think it was my first competition that I entered when I got into car audio. I had a S10 because I didn't want panel flex because I was only in it for sound quality. I wasn't trying to do SPL. But SPL was just starting. It was an IASCA sanctioned event, and there was these two guys, one with um, Rockford Fosgate's best 12s and 2,500 watts, which back then, that, you know, you couldn't get a charging system to do much more than that.
Right.
And he had a nice box, and it was in the back of a Bronco, okay? And there was another Bronco just like his that had a wall, and the wall had 12 10s in it, or 10 12s, I don't remember, and 130 watt amp. And they both hit the exact same number, all right?
Okay.
Which I don't remember what it was, maybe 134 or 138 or something like that. And but the difference is the guy with the 212s sounded like, you know, a wet towel hitting a Rubbermaid garbage can lid. And it had diarrhea bad, all right? And the guy with the wall, that bass was just as tight as a brick. It was perfect. There wasn't any harmonic distortion in it. It was refreshing at 138. It was great. And I thought, well, there you go. You know, it doesn't make any sense at all if you can get away with a more efficient driver, you know, but there was obviously a tipping point where that approach starts to fail once the power gets to a certain level.
Right. Power compression.
Yeah, you got to
That's
have
exactly,
enough air around that coil, and the coil's got to be thick. The moving mass has to go way up. Everything just turns it, you know, power. If you take it from the argument that power is bottomless, we can make as much power as we need. Then it just becomes about how strong can we make the device, you know, the woofer. And that's the direction that it went. because where else could it go? I mean, right?
Yeah, I mean the average car now. Um, oh, why is the video so dead now? I'm not sure what that means. Let's see here. They used to have so many more viewers. I don't know what he's talking about. I'm not sure. Um, anyway, so anyway, yeah, like I said, so for me personally, whether you guys like this or not, this one was all about for me. Steve is um, somebody that I would strongly suggest you guys listen to. He's got a book. Tell us about your website real quick, Steve. What's on it and where it's at and all that.
Well, if you're um, new to car audio or into DIY, just Google secrets of car audio and it'll pop right.
Mm.
Okay.
Otherwise, you just go to Deckwer.com. That's our main website. And we manufacture high-end tube gear for the home primarily. That's what we do now. We did car audio years ago, but
And so he also sells plans for different things. The House Wrecker, which is a home audio box, the Wicked One, which is a home audio and car audio box, the Death Box, the Low Rider are some of the things. So you can purchase those plans from his website. I purchased those plans many years ago. So I still have all those things. And like I said, I refer to them, and they are, if somebody wants a cheap go-to, I always suggest the Death Box. It's real easy. You can make it work with any vehicle. Okay, so Jeffrey, we're about out of time here. You want to hit him with the question?
Sure, sure. So, Steve, this is a question that we ask all of our guests. Basically, we want to know, what is your definition of a bass head?
somebody that looks for the extreme performance of things.
So,
You know,
okay.
somebody who's not satisfied with the norm, someone who likes to
Mhm.
push the envelope and has the taste to tell the difference.
Okay. No, that's a good answer. That's not one we've had before, um, which is sure. So Steve, they can get a hold of you on the website. Like I said, if you guys are into reading and want to learn his car audio book, what's the name of your car audio book?
Secrets of car audio.
Secrets of
Secrets of
Car.
car audio.
So he talks about time alignment in there and some other stuff, which is actually really cool to read up on. You can learn a lot of stuff from Steve, and he's real out there on the internet. He has a forum. How is your forum still pretty active, Steve? Or
Oh yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah.
So they got a forum in there to help you if you are having problems with some of the designs, or like I said, they test so many things, but it's definitely a higher level thinking when you get into those forums, especially with the tube amps. They're talking about different wires being used for your interconnects, and
Mm.
it's definitely higher level at a lower cost. Is that a pretty good accurate
Yeah, I would
description?
say so. And ironically, it's a lot of people that started out in car audio took that enthusiasm into their living room, you
Hmm.
know, and we're just applying the same thing, but from a sound quality perspective. Instead of SPL, uh, we're we're about the 3D hologram of making speakers disappear and creating an intoxicatingly deep sound stage, and getting the width to go 10 feet on either side of the speaker, and that's a science that's really not that different. It's just not as loud.
Hmm. But the principles still hold true, and
Yeah,
you can if you understand the principles, you can use them in your car also.
yeah,
And
you can
that's what
use
I'm getting at with this whole
it. Yep.
thing.
Yep,
Um,
it's both ways.
so it says, really, it says, Tristan from Bridgetown, Barbados says, Steve, it was really awesome to hear the voice of a great audiophile legend. I will not forget the show for sure.
Nice.
And that's my intent, just to hear people. I would love to get Oki on here. As Jeffrey knows, Oki's one of the coolest dudes in the world. He used to travel the world just to sit in vehicles that did 170s back in the early 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that was his thing.
His trademark thumbs
Yes,
up.
thumbs up with the coffee cup.
And he'd be sitting behind, like the Riley's Extreme vehicle with their, a thick bulletproof glass windshield. You can see him, the little tiny go doing this. So he knows a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and like I said, so I really want to bring the legends on here, people that have a different level of understanding of what we do, and then hopefully you guys can go back to the stuff that they the stuff that they put out. Like Steve has got so much stuff on the internet. So it's going to happen. We're not looking forward to it, but one day when he's gone, he's put so much out on the internet that it's still there. And this is an opportunity for you guys to look at it, understand it, and grow from it. So, guys, we've already hit the hour mark. We've asked our question. Jeffrey, what's going on behind you, sir?
I have a triple point event happening
Moses
Sunday,
is not happy
February.
about that.
No? Well, he needs to, step it up. Well, he's more than welcome to come if he wants to. It's going to be Sunday, February 19th, Crossfire Car Audio out there at Grapevine, Texas. Should be a fun show.
All right, awesome.
Check it out, dbdragracing.com.
Remember, next week we're going to have the, what's it called? The judges on, Ray Choi, Wyatt, myself, and Jeffrey. So if you guys have any questions about Sound Deadener, we'll break the internet again.
Oh, no.
Any other questions about competing in DB drag racing? We are here to answer them, but you got to be at the live show. Otherwise, we don't know what your questions are. Have them ready, ask us, and we will do the best we possibly can. Guys, reach out to Steve. Steve is, like I said, he is, from what I've learned, oh, you mean you break, we're going to break DB drag again? From what I've learned over the time, Steve's pretty much an open book, and he's willing to help anybody out. So, reach out to him and his company. Help support those who do the things you do. Our sponsors here, we got Pun Customs and Crossfire Car Audio. Steve Deckert has a Recone. They sell Recone parts still, or no?
Yeah, we still sell re-edge kit.
Okay, so they sell re-edging kits. They do all kinds of stuff. Sell speakers, and like I said, box designs that you can build yourself. The radial speakers for your home audio are actually really, really cool. So if you're into that stuff, what's his name? Purple hair, purple beard. The one that lives in Sacramento with the purple car. He had the purple beard. John Nolte. John Nolte built some of that radial stuff. He did the helicopter. So you'd be really cool. You'd have a great time talking to John Nolte. He actually made a helicopter blades and made them into a subwoofer. So then they move at a frequency and they spin. And it actually is a really cool subwoofer design.
Yeah.
So he did that. So, like I said, and he's another person that the guys did. Also, if you guys get a chance, go on to Pun Customs Facebook page. His building burnt down. Go over there, hit up his Facebook, show some love for him if you would. Help us grow membership on the YouTube side. I think I got everything. Remember, support those who support us. Puns Customs and Crossfire Car Audio. We will see you guys next week with judging questions on This Week in Car Audio. Next week, 5:30 p.m. California time, the only time that matters. We will see you guys next week.